Hey there, welcome to Author Success Show. In today's episode, the special guest we have is Dr. Troy Hall. Dr. Troy is an award winning culture strategist, a global speaker, a best selling author, and talent retention expert. His doctorate in Global Leadership and Entrepreneurship has sent him across the globe to help leaders create cultures of cohesion and retain top talent in their organizations. Dr. Troy is the author of 3 best-selling books, Cohesion Culture, Mission Matters, and FANNY Rules. In today's episode, we are going to find out how Dr. Troy has used his books to position himself as the go-to international expert when it comes to talent retention and how he has managed to get several global consulting gigs as a result of his books. Let's meet Dr. Troy. Hello, Dr. Troy. Welcome to Author Success Show.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here, Josna. Thank you for inviting me. It's going to be a wonderful day, I know.
It's my pleasure to have you on the show, Dr. Troy. So you are so inspiring. The work that you do globally is so motivating. So tell me, at what point of time did you realize that you are going to have talent retention as your area of expertise?
Well, first of all, thank you for being so kind with those words. I appreciate that very much. When I decided that I was going to really create a product in the marketplace, I had to decide, what was I going to do? And what would my voice be? What would be the product offering that would be different? And how could I actually position it? So I referred back to my studies. I have a PhD in Global Leadership and Entrepreneurship. My dissertation was in group dynamics with an emphasis on cohesion. And as I look back at that material, I was like, oh, wow, cohesive teams working together, wouldn't that be great? Well, what is one of the great benefits of it? It's talent retention. And when I looked into the marketplace, what I recognized, and still today, even though this particular book that I released has been out for 2 years, there is very little other literature that's in the in that space that actually talks about talent retention. There's a lot of emphasis on talent acquisition and on talent training, but there's very little information really out there about talent retention. So it really became a way to say, aha, there's something that I can speak to, and I can use the research and all the information, create a program. So hence the program Cohesion Culture was created. And that's the message that I now deliver to leaders around the globe.
Wow, that's amazing, because a lot of times we may already be doing something really well, but we really do not know that that's going to be our one thing unless we really intentionally look for that one thing.
That is correct. It's intentionality to really look for it and to decide. I think that you have to decide what is your voice, much like your podcast. If your podcast was all over the place, people wouldn't really know what it was about. But this is about author success. So you're actually directing your information, your conversation, and everything to that. And once you understand that, and for the most part, yours would be a unique podcast. Most individuals might just want to be sharing leadership information or something else, but you're really going to help people figure out what they want to do and maybe how they can market it through a book.
Yeah, that's true. So, Dr. Troy, when you decided that your program is going to be about cohesion culture, did the program happen first or did the book happen first?
A little bit of both. It kind of came together. The one thing we had to decide is, what is a cohesion culture? A cohesion culture is a safe work environment where people have a sense of belonging, are valued, and share in mutual commitments. And that strategic framework of belonging, value, and shared mutual commitment became the basis for the book. And then we began writing the book. And I say we, had a creative team, we worked to put the book together to actually figure out, well, what would be the right things that we want to talk about. And so I organized the book in the way in which I would work with you as a consulting client, because I do consulting work. I help organizations create the culture that they may need or supplement the culture that they may want to really produce that great environment where they can retain the talent that they have. So the book is written with 3 acts in mind. The first act is about be a leader. The second act is build the culture. And the third act is bring it to life. And there's a lot of fun stories. So this is not your traditional book where it's, oh, PhD, blah, blah, blah. I actually included my love for theater, my love for music, my love for writing and books, sort of with the analogies and the examples that are within it. So my favorite chapter is the final chapter, and it's called, it's talking about the Wizard of Oz, and it's your place to belong. And there's no place like home.
Wow, that definitely seems like a lot of fun, because usually PhDs are all about the serious, research and, all of the theses that you put together. So how different was it to write a book as compared to submitting a thesis?
Well, it's interesting, but one of the things we learned through the process is what we call, writing for the public. So it's, popular press, they refer to it. So there's a difference between academic writing and popular press. And so I had some background and experience in that. Of course, I've got 40 some years that I've, done work in business and written. I've been speaking internationally since 1999. So I have a little bit of an idea for how to make it a little more interesting than simply to make it something that some of my colleagues may want to read. So to make it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, when you write for academic purposes, you'll have to quote every single research that you took it from and things like that. But when you write it for the public, you'll obviously add more anecdotes and stories and make it more fun.
Yes, you do. And you still reference. So you'll find in the book, there's several references to the material that will call some attention to, where I may got the idea or some background in case people want to look for it.
Yeah, sure. So do you use the book as a companion guide for your programs?
Yes. As a matter of fact, part of the engagement is for everyone to read chapters 1 and 2, which is about being the leader. Because what I find is in the cohesion culture process is that if the leader's not right, then the rest of the stuff isn't going to follow through. It doesn't really matter. You can have whatever culture you want, but if the leadership isn't supporting the culture, then you really have an ineffective result. And so we get the leaders right first and then move on. And we really package this entire program now under what we call the Cohesion Culture Cycle, so that I can take an organization from the very beginning of observation to the conclusion of where they are. And it includes things like their what we call cultural discovery, assessment, plan development, education, and then sustainability. So it really becomes cakes when you think about it. So I think about it because we're sometimes meant and called to be superhuman people in HR when we're dealing with that. So we all need a superhuman cape. So this is our little capes process through our cohesion culture cycle.
Right. As an entrepreneur yourself, have you noticed how your clients look at you differently after you wrote the book? Because I'm sure you would have trained corporates even before you became an author. But now that you have this entire system, which is accompanied by a book as well, how does it work differently now?
Well, it gets attention. I mean, the one thing I will tell you, you're spot on with that. When I was Mr. Hall, I had 40 years of experience. People could listen to me as Mr. Hall. However, Dr. Hall over the last decade also opened up doors that would not maybe normally have been opened. But with the book, it just solidified everything, because the book is kind of like my brochure. So to sort of explain, if you want to know a little bit about me, because there's some personal information in the book as well. And it also is a guide. I didn't want people to have to buy 2 or 3 books to figure out the whole story. Like, it wasn't about bait and switch. For me, it's about, hey, here's the book. And what I do recognize and know is that you need that book to create your, what we call, authority voice. So for the individual authors who are listening to the podcast today, or maybe watching it on YouTube, they'll want to know that they need to figure out what their authority voice is. And that was those beginning questions that you asked me when we started. And that is, what do you want to do? And how will it be different? That's the real question you have to ask yourself. I mean, a lot of people will be doing stuff and they'll go, oh, this would be really great if I created this. Well, then you have to ask, well, does it already exist? And what's going to make yours different from everybody else's? So writing a book about culture, what made mine different was there isn't anything about cohesion culture. And then it's about how you market it and how you position it so that you will continue to be the authority. If you do a Google search today on cohesion culture, you'll see that most of the information that pops up, if not all the information that pops up on the first 90% of your screen, is all about me and the cohesion culture program.
Yeah, I think you've done a commendable job in really owning that space. And now you're known for that, globally, for this particular topic. So,
Yes,
Dr.
ma'am.
Troy, I read somewhere that when you were younger, somebody told you that you're no good at writing. So, was that like something that stopped you from writing a book for a long time? How did you actually break that?
Well, interestingly enough, I shared that information with my mother, and my mother is the subject of my second best-selling title called "FANNY RULES: A
Right.
Mother's Leadership Lessons That Never Grow Old." And Fanny was my mom's nickname, so that's why it's called "FANNY RULES." And so when I shared this information with my mom, she's thought for a minute. She was always very careful about what she would say, especially when she knew she was doing a teaching moment. And she looked at me and she says, it's not the successes or failures that's going to shape your life. It's how you handle them.
Wow.
And, and then she also asked me this question. If you do want to write, do you want to write for yourself, or do you want to write to prove somebody else wrong? That's very powerful, in that to really begin to understand that, especially from a leadership perspective, I don't want to do anything to prove somebody wrong. I want to do something because it's the right thing to do. So I basically honed my skill based on what I needed to do, business writing, whatever I thought I needed to kind of create the change in me and in what would happen. And I will tell the folks who are listening, this was the pivotal moment for me, was when I understood the difference between passive writing and active writing. And when you know the difference between those two, then it changes the way your writing comes across. And it becomes across much more powerful than it does when it's active than when it's passive. Now, are there times when you have passive writing? Yes. But in business, or when you're selling a point, or when you're communicating or teaching, you want a more active voice. So, and I'll just give you a quick example so that those who are listening can understand what I mean.
Sure.
A passive voice says, the report was prepared by the manager. That's passive, because the report is what is being done, but it's being done by the manager. If you want active voice, you will say, the manager prepared the report. And oftentimes, if you are the type of individual who is thinking about other people and always being considerate of that, you might write more passively. You might think of it in that way, like, oh, I'm going to do this for you. But the reality is that you want the message to be what the subject is the person. And then the report is the object of the subject. I know it's a little bit of an English class here, but because you did ask me about the writing, that was pivotal to me. Once I understood that, it changed the power of my writing completely. And I'd always been good at organizing the material. I think I have a pretty good process mind. So for me, things just kind of, line up, and I was really good at what comes first. And those little tests that you would give, and they would give you like 10 objects, and you figure out what comes before the other item and how you have to do things in an order. I was always really good at that, a little intuitiveness to it, but actually then communicating that changed everything. And I also really worked on not doing run-on sentences, like sometimes you write a lot of information, and so you think you can add commas to it. And I found that if you can't say it in one breath, then you might want to change it. So keep them to shorter sentences. That also helps break things up, and then make sure that you are explaining whatever it is you're trying to communicate, because oftentimes I knew what I was talking about, but I wouldn't explain it, or I wouldn't communicate it to individuals in a way in which I was saying it so that they would understand. It's like for cohesion culture. When I talk about cohesion culture, like I did in the beginning of this podcast, I defined it for you.
Right.
I didn't make people guess at what it was. I made sure that they knew that it was a safe work environment where people have a sense of belonging, are valued, and share in mutual commitments. And that just has to resonate with the writing all the time. So even when I'm doing my 1,000th post on cohesion culture, I still am including somehow, some way into that information what it is, so that the new reader, the person who sees it for the first time, doesn't wonder, well, what is that?
That's such a valuable piece of advice, Dr. Troy, because a lot of times, especially when we are an expert in a particular topic, we know it so well that we just assume that others should also get it. But if we keep the reader in mind while writing, our writing automatically improves. And the book is, after all, for the reader and not for the author.
That's right. Yes, you want other people to love your creation as much as you do.
Yeah. So I would love to know all about FANNY Rules. How did that idea come about?
Well, it was all part of a process. So the first book in the series was My Authority Voice. The second book in the series was a global book, and that was
Mhm.
called Mission Matters. And it's 18 different authors who are putting collection of their best tips that they would give. These are world leading entrepreneurs giving their best tip or advice. And so I participated in that because I had the authority voice. I wanted to make sure the global voice. For me, it was not just being academic. I
Mm.
wanted to ensure that I was being purposeful in my global reach and global outlook. And so then the third aspect is let people in on the inside. Let
Mhm.
people know who you are. So my mom was always really good at helping instruct and provide me with information. So what happened was, I figured she would be the great subject for me to provide a leadership book. And it's a self-help mentoring guide is what it is. When I was 12 years old, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. We lived in a very small rural town in the United States in a state called West Virginia.
Mhm.
Poor economic conditions, limited education, and we were about 30 to 45 minutes from the nearest medical facility. When someone was diagnosed 50 years ago with cancer, the prognosis was typically death. We thought mom would die. But mom rallied herself around this, and she said, before the doctors told me what was going to happen, I plan to live. She says, so I'm going to live every day until
Wow.
God takes me. That's basically what she said. So she decided to wait and have her surgery during the summer when I could take care of her. My dad was there. My dad, I have a great relationship with my dad, but the book's just about my mom. And he had to work. He was the protector and provider. Mom was the nurturer and caregiver. So I had to then serve in that role of nurturer and caregiver for mom for that summer and nurture her through the surgery and the outcome
Mhm.
after the surgery. Well, the good news is mom lived 43 years after that awful summer that we had. However, later in life, she was diagnosed with dementia and Alzheimer's stole her memories. So
Mm.
when I was thinking about what I wanted to do with the book to be purposeful, I wanted to make sure that I was paying homage to my mom's leadership, that
Right.
I could also create a book that would create some awareness around Alzheimer's and the fact that, it really took mom's life. So my proceeds of the book, Fanny Rules, goes to the Alzheimer's Association here in the US.
Wow, that's such a thoughtful and meaningful tribute to your mom, and she was such a wise woman. And I really appreciate that. See, you have the kind of connections that you could just reach out to any leadership guru and interview a bunch of them and put it together as a book. But instead, you went back to your roots and shared these wise lessons from your mom's life, and that's really, really commendable. And I also love this three-part approach towards your author branding. One is
Yes.
about your authority brand, one is about positioning you as a global leader, and the third is about the personal connect that your audience can have with you. I think I am
And
going to teach this formula to all my clients so that they don't
okay,
come to me
great.
for just one book, but they write 3 books with me.
Exactly. And then you also, so now book 4 is going to go back to the cohesion culture and it's going to explain more of what we call the cohesion culture cycle. So the book explains the cohesion culture and what to do. Now the cycle is the consulting work that I've been doing directly with leaders. And this is now the real practice. Like we've put all this work into it. So now here is the cycle of what you do from the leader's initial observations of their
Mm.
culture to when they start to sustain it, all the way through all of that, from that discovery phase to the sustainability phase, is part of what we refer to as the cohesion culture cycle. And you think of it today as a culture wellness program. That's really what it is. So we're talking about wellness for our employees. This is culture wellness. And what do you do to make sure that your culture is healthy and vibrant? And
Right.
that's what you do. You follow the cohesion culture cycle. And the good news is it's never intended for people to replicate it exactly. You use the framework, but you still have your own stories, your own rituals, your own traditions, your own customs, your own language. All that's still you. You just take the strategic framework, and basically we take belonging, value, and shared mutual commitment, lay it over top of your organization, and decide, do you have components for all 3 of them? Are you creating a balanced wellness program for your
Mm.
culture? And if not, then good. Now we know some of the areas where you can work on, and then you can start developing your programs to supplement what you need to do.
Right. So I have this one question that a lot of trainers, especially corporate trainers, ask. They tell me that, hey, if I give away all my, secret frameworks inside my book, who's going to hire my consulting gigs? So what do you have to tell these people who have that fear of not giving away everything in their book?
Well, I say to you a little bit like this. You know, people, you can give people the information, but they don't do it.
That's right.
Okay. It's like if they I think about a cookbook, right? So cookbook's following a recipe. Well, sometimes you have to interact if depending upon the recipe or the complexity of the recipe, you have to consult with a professional baker to really help you make sure that you do what you need to do, or you have to do trial and error. Well, most people in the corporate world aren't going to treat their culture like they're baking a cake. They're going to treat it more like, I need someone to come in and help me. And what I will tell you completely to understand is that the people who are already on the path, those are the people who hire me. The people who think they already have it done, they're the ones that are in trouble, but they don't always reach out.
Right. So there's always going to be that serious set of people who are action takers, who really want that one-on-one hand-holding from the expert, in your case, from the author themselves. So I'm sure if 100 people read the book, a part of them are going to reach out to your company and see how they can work with you.
Exactly. And that's exactly how it is. Very little. I mean, I wouldn't have much of a business, but the models worked for me. So I would hope it will work for your authors as well.
Right. And this is the perfect answer for those who tell me, how many books should I sell to make the ROI from my book project? Because the real money comes from the back end and not from selling the book.
Not from the front end. That's exactly right. Yeah. The book is used to set you up as the authority. It allows you to provide maybe in speaking opportunities that you maybe wouldn't have to be able to do it. And today, what I remember this like education. It used to be get a basic degree. That was the first thing. And then it stepped it up and says, well, now you need an MBA. So in addition, or you need some master's or some additional certification program. And, I took it at another level and said, okay, well, I'm going to get the doctorate, and I'm going to cut this off now early on. So I'll get that out of the way. But, if the book for the speaking and the consulting is the next level, people are more assured of following you. And especially when they can see that the book has reviews and they see that people have read it and they've got comments, and it becomes your proof. Because, people are skeptical when it comes to sometimes deciding, do I want to spend especially significant amount of money? They have some skepticism. So the book is the proof. And that's the only way that you can solve skepticism is with proof. So for me, it's the book. And like I said, it's a business. It's like my brochure. So when I interact with someone and they show some interest, then I ask them for their mailing address. I said, where would be a good place for me to mail a copy of my book? I mail them a copy of the book. And it creates the energy around the activity. So that's how that works.
Very well said, Dr. Troy. So when can we expect your fourth book?
We hope in 22. So it'll be later this year. So we're really expecting a launch possibly in midsummer.
Perfect. And for all the people who are listening or watching us, if they would like to go ahead and find out more about your books and your work, where can they go and find out?
Well, it's real easy. They go to drtroyhall.com. That's drtroyhall.com. And on social media, like on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, you can find me at Facebook. You can find me at drtroyhall. So it's only 10 letters. drtroyhall. 10 letters.
Perfect. We'll have all the links also right below in the show notes. Thank you so much, Dr. Troy, for spending your valuable time with us. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Well, thank you. I did too. It was really awesome. And you have a blessed and wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.